It's my great honor and pleasure to be hosting again today a very good friend of mine who came many months ago to talk about modern day medicine versus Islamic medicine. It is no other than our very own Dr. Muhammad Salim Khan, who is an expert in Tibb Nabwi medicine, which is a medicine which from the branch of knowledge of the beloved Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is also the president of the International Guild of Iridologists. He is a specialist naturopathic physician which specializes in nutrition and herbal medicine, a branch of knowledge and expertise which has come under attack over the last few decades from the area of in modern medicine. And there's lots to talk about, and I welcome them today on today's program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam, jazakallah. Thank you so much for such a warm welcome. Thank you.
You know, whenever we get together, there's so much to talk about, and we always try and find the things that which for my own personal curiosity, I'm always digging for knowledge and wisdom from yourself, and I've benefited for years that I've known yourself. You've always shared some secret tips and knowledge and wisdom that which has benefited me tremendously in every aspect of my life. And no doubt, you've trained and you're training people now also who can continue with this specialist knowledge and help many others as well, because this is a legacy I believe that you're creating. Because sometimes you've mentioned to me many times before that people in your field have died and taken that knowledge with them. They've kept it close to their chest, and they've not shared or trained anybody else. What do you say about that? It's such a big shame if that is the case.
Well, look, jazakallah, thank you again. Alhamdulillah, whatever I've helped you to understand or to improve is Allah's mercy. But Zafar, I think given, because you live a busy life, mashallah, you're not aware that, well, I'm sure you are aware, that we have a new government, and this new government, which came in July, commissioned a report about National Health Service.
I did read about that.
So I think it might be useful for us to just quickly look at that report and...
I've got that here.
Yeah?
This is basically highlighting, the big headline is that the NHS is broken. And this is something we've been hearing about, seeing on our television screens for years really, but for some reason it seems to have amplified these voices over the last few months, especially since this new government has come on board, that they have now openly, the reason why they're able to say that, because they can pin the blame on the previous government. It's easy for the new person to come and say, look, I'm telling you this is broken, but it's not my fault. There was another government in place in charge of this, or another person or organization was in charge for the last 14 years. But reading this does not make pleasant reading in terms of the state of the NHS and what implications it's going to have on us all, because we're all, heading towards that period of our life where we're aging, we'll be relying on these healthcare services, and what lies ahead, it's quite a frightening prospect.
Yeah. So look, it's interesting, this report, how it's been commissioned and how it's been kind of highlighted. One could say that yes, the new people have come in and they want to put some of the blame on the earlier governments. That is, I think, partly true. But also,
would you say it goes beyond that? It's not just
I
the
think
last
it goes
14
beyond
years.
that. I think the people in this country, in our country, in England and in UK, they've been saying this for a long time. And if we look at the targets which different governments have set for NHS, there used to be a winter crisis in NHS, but now the NHS is in crisis
all the
the
time,
whole year round.
Yeah.
And it's actually no longer a crisis. These are now crises. And again, it's interesting. I don't necessarily support any political party. I participate in the once a fourth year voting. Uh, but really, it's interesting that it was originally the Labour government in 1948 that set up the NHS. And therefore, NHS is not only essential for people who are elderly, but NHS is really important for all ages and all people. And it is the first national health service which was created in the whole world, free at the point of delivery. And now it's openly acknowledged by the politicians and the professionals, which the public have known for a long time, that it is broken. The question is, how can it be fixed if it is possible to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And NHS is an organization, and its delivery is based on what is called modern medicine. And we really need to understand what are the origins of modern medicine. The origin of modern medicine, sometimes called biomedicine, stems from a report in 1910 in the USA called the Flexner Report. And
So that predated the creation of the NHS. So would you say that formed the basis of the creation of this template for the NHS?
Well, yes, it did. But what's important to understand is that the Flexner Report was funded by two major organizations. One is still exists called Rockefeller, and the other is Carnegie Foundation.
So but if they were involved, it means that the money was involved.
And at that time, there were many colleges and schools which were training people in naturopathic medicine, what is nowadays called complementary and alternative medicine. In fact, majority of the colleges were training physicians in those traditions and systems.
Mm-hmm.
But when the report...
And this was in the mainstream education?
This was actually more mainstream than what is called modern medicine at that time.
Wow.
But by the way they created the report and then the subsequent funding, they ensured the elimination of natural medicines. So biomedicine then came forth, and this is the model which is used globally now, whether it is in Britain, the physicians are trained according to that, or whether it is in any other country. So this is the modern medicine. And really it's fascinating and sad at the same time that a nation like Britain, with its NHS, after so many years, is crumbling. It can't even deliver basic services such as accidents and emergencies.
Why is that?
There are many reasons for that. Some people will say it's lack of money. Partly it's true. Others will say, well, it's a poor management. Maybe there is. Others say, well, there are political issues. Maybe that's true. But really at the root, no matter how much money is invested in NHS, because it is a wrong model, it's based on wrong assumptions. What are the assumptions that it's based on? We need to go back to a little earlier time, which is that when in Europe the churches and the nobility and the rulers were exploiting and controlling the masses in the 15th century, there were two movements that came about, which we discussed before. One was the Renaissance, which means that the people wanted to go back to what they say is the classical Greek and Roman civilization or culture or heritage. And after that came around the Reformation movement, which was that Christianity inherently was not suitable and therefore it needed to be reformed. So this massive kind of uprising, you could call it quietly, against the faith
So the
and the church.
Reformation was the uprising against the Renaissance period.
No, Reformation was really a step forward after the Renaissance.
Which was the uprising?
No, the Renaissance was really movements in European societies which said we need to go back to the classical Greece and Rome. That's our heritage. And classical Greece and Rome, obviously, like any civilization, had good qualities and good practices. But it also had pagan ideas. It also had secular ideas. So the Renaissance brought to the surface those ideas. And later on, when Reformation happened, which was to basically clip the wings of Christianity, because the churches had been involved in partly the exploitation of the masses. And you could say that, Europeans actually had a deep trauma as a result of that continuous many hundred years of exploitation by the rulers in which all these groups were involved. And therefore they rejected this concept of religion, spirituality, and the connection with earlier wisdom-based traditions.
So would you say that that was the beginning of the decline of Christianity and spirituality from the modern day societies that we have now in Europe, in the UK?
Yes.
Because in the last census, it was declared that more people are now atheist in this country than identifying as with a major religion like Christianity, because these were traditionally Christian countries.
Yes, and I think I just want to touch on another tangent, if I may please, which is that as Muslims, it's interesting that although we have nearly 1400 years of our own cultures and, our relationship with faith and religion and spirituality, but we've never experienced as collective people this kind of exploitation and this kind of psychological and economic oppression by our religious classes. This is something very important. So even when we talk to people today who are from European background, we have a big lacuna. We have a big gap in our understanding that what the history is of the European peoples in terms of how they were exploited and what role the rulers, the nobility, the churches played in that.
Is that because obviously we weren't there, we never affected us? And
No, it was, yes, partly it's true that we weren't here at that time, but what's important is that in our civilization, this has never occurred. So we don't know this. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something. But if we go back then, really it's after those movements that the basis of modernity emerges. Now what's interesting is that the so-called scientific model was actually something which was developed by the Muslim scholars and scientists and physicians.
Mm-hmm.
But the scientific method, unlike today, did not become a new religion. The scientific method was part of many other sciences. So in the Islamic corpuses of knowledge, we have, for example, the word ilm and ulum is like science and sciences. But today what's interesting, if you speak today in modern context, if you say science, what people mean is a particular model of experimentation. So part of modern medicine is that it says that unless it can prove scientifically by this model alone, it is not evidence-based. Now, the other thing which happened after the Renaissance and Reformation is that really once the disconnect happened with the spiritual and the revealed tradition, however weak it was, is that the notion of human being got lost. And as the industrial revolutions and the technological revolutions happened, the whole concept of human being became a machine. Yeah? So the focus was that really if there is anything wrong with the person, it is like any other machine. We need to understand and treat it as a machine. So the modern medicine became mechanistic, and after, thanks to Flexner, it became pharmaceutical. Therefore, it was no longer catering for the human being, the whole human being, because they had already got rid of the spiritual dimension of the person. And today it's interesting that how this word holistic, and we serve the whole person.
It's just a buzzword.
It's a buzzword, and if you ask them, what does it mean? There's no methodology. So
just define modernity. When we talk about this period of modernity, just for the listeners, how do you define that? How do people identify and, shall I say, describe this period of modernity?
Look, modernity is a long period, and different scholars obviously see it, its beginning and middle and end. But clearly, I would say that from my understanding, I'm using the word modernity from beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But the seeds were sown for modernity earlier as industrialization happened and as different technologies developed the modernity. Some people now refer to post-modernity. Yeah? So the lifestyle, for example, which people are living today is seen as a modern lifestyle. And it is seen as the most desirable lifestyle, but also it is seen by the creators of modernity, which happens to be, in this case, North, global North, global North. It sees as the zenith, the highest level of human development. Yeah? And therefore, the so-called emerging world or developing world or non-industrialized world or the third world, the whole focus is by the people in the modernity and post-modernity cultures to promote this as an ideal for humanity.
Just because we're in this period of modernization, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us, is it?
Well, look, some parts are good for us, but on the whole, what we are now finding, whether it is ecological crisis or whether it is a health crisis,
psychological,
or mental, emotional, psychological crisis, or spiritual crisis and malaise, or even the gender relationships between men and women, they're all mostly in a mess.
Falling apart.
So one could say really that these are the poisonous fruits of modernity.
I mean, something we mentioned earlier when you drove down here, and I said, look, and you mentioned about the traffic, and I said, this is a modern day phenomena, that we live in this modern era, that we get in our cars, these machines, this advanced technology, and we sit in traffic for 1 hour just to get from one place to another. And some of us who are commuting repeat this in the morning and evening as a normal sort of routine to go backwards and forwards between home and work. But this is something that our ancestors didn't do, where they're sitting in traffic for 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day. Surely that's not good for our mental health.
Certainly, it's not good for our
Physical as well,
health.
yeah.
It's not good for our physical health. It's not good for our emotional health. It's not good for our mental health. And it's certainly not good for our spiritual well-being. But this is now becoming the norm, and people are expected. You could say that really, like the earlier periods, this is another form of control and exploitation. But it is being packaged and promoted in a way where now the individual has no choice almost but to live like this.
Sadly.
Sadly. Now, what I want to do is really, if I have your permission, is to just connect with something from the Prophet ﷺ.
Ji.
The Prophet ﷺ said that their time was the best time. And then as the period moves away from their blessed time, that becomes slowly removed from the spiritual and other positive dimensions.
So there'll be a decline.
And there is a decline. Now, what's fascinating, Zafar, is that as a practitioner and a physician, I have 4 generations of patients. And even on a physical level, there is a degeneration of the human being and their health, their immune system. And one finds that on an emotional level as well, and on a spiritual level. To the extent that if we look at earlier books on formulations of natural remedies, if one was to give the same dose that a book mentions, let's say 1,000 years ago, to a person today, they will not even be able to metabolize, never mind what it's going to do to them. So that's how weak the modern human being is. Yeah?
And definitely, I'm not a physician, but I can definitely see a change from one generation to another, in the sense that we say our parents were healthier because they were born in developing countries where their diet was good, organic, limited. We had much more indulgence and a lot more rich foods. But the next generation, which is eating more and more takeaway foods and junk foods, and their health is definitely going to be more rapidly deteriorating than even ours.
Indeed, yes. One sees that both in daily life and in practices. Now, what's fascinating then, that really this whole idea, part of the modernity, is that nature by design inherently is not good. Therefore, the promotion of synthetic so-called medicines and drugs was encouraged, promoted, and now we're moving to a next level of this same erroneous thinking, that really a lot of research and work is on creating vaccines, which is a higher level of, according to some, technologies, we're using higher level of technology. And you yourself, just to kind of, again, go for a tangent, part of modernity is the
quick fixes,
dehumanization of the insan, the human being, and this concept of transgender, and now this idea of transhuman, this idea of singularity, that some of the best brains of our time are working on how to create an interface between human beings and technology and machines, so one cannot see any separation between the new creature, which will be the transhuman.
Obviously, Dr. Salim, we're living in an era where artificial intelligence is being promoted so much now that we actually are already seeing how this AI technology is going to be integrating into the lives of human beings, where you will be now sort of transfixed into this new technology in your everyday living.
Yes, again, I think we need to take a step back, that really we need to talk about what are appropriate technologies.
Because not all technology is bad.
Indeed, not all technologies are bad. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the appropriate technologies for our needs as human beings? And then in that, there are different categories. For example, gender, ethnicity, and so on. So technologies should be there to serve us. But I think this idea of singularity and transhuman is not about technology, it's about elimination of the human being. Bit like we see elimination of many other traits and qualities from human beings.
So explain. So with this technology, they're trying to eliminate human beings in terms of, are they trying to make us into robots as well? Would be make us into machines, remove our intellect, our emotions? What is it?
I mean, I don't know. I'm no expert on AI or any of these technologies. I can hardly use a modern phone, which they call smartphone. So I can't go there because I don't know enough about it. The point I'm making is that these are outcomes which people are pursuing who are in power and who have resources and who have skills that in a way to lessen the human being. Now, what's again interesting is that in the Quran, you probably know that one of the challenge which Iblis gave to Allah, that he's going to denature Allah's creation.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I've discussed that many times with people, especially in this era of transgender movement. Yeah.
Transgender movement, but you know that Dolly the sheep was the first clone which happened in UK, and those technologies are being used in food and in animals in a way which, again, coming back to the health really, that if you look at some of the reasons for poor health, it is because people are being fed with what you could say fake foods, or really you could say that they are in a form of dajjal. What dajjal means is something which appears or says something, but in reality it's different. So if we take the modern chicken, what is a modern chicken?
Something that's pumped with so many chemicals. It's fed artificial food, fake food, not natural to what the chicken should be eating. And B, from what I know, they create these little chicks now which can grow into fully grown chicks in literally days rather than weeks and months.
Yeah. But they've also been genetically modified from the normal chicken, whatever the normal chicken was.
Yeah.
Most people don't even know about it, yeah?
Yeah.
So the point I'm making really, the more one removes humanity from fitra,
Natural state.
the natural state which Allah in His mercy and wisdom has created, the more one is going to become ill, whether it is physical illness or any other dimension of the person.
See, this is what I've always said. Why in our society are more and more people getting ill? And the example that I always give is that where we are originally from in Pakistan, a village where probably 30 years ago you would have had one state hospital and probably one or two small GP sort of practices and clinics. But now, just literally around the corner, we have major private hospitals, and they're all thriving.
Yes, of course they are, because people are becoming, because they are adopting, modern lifestyle, and it has its consequences. Now, what's interesting is that recently in UK there is a new project. Nearly 2 million people have enrolled on it, and it's called the Future Health. And this is a big project, probably one of the biggest in the world, just recently started, to identify and focus on how to understand keeping people healthy.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is
Or
that
how to keep them ill.
yeah, what's interesting really
Yeah.
is that the whole basis of prophetic medicine, Tib Nabi, in its tarif, in its definition, and its in objectives, it says that it is to maintain the health and well-being of the person, which is to preserve health and to promote health. That's the first objective of wisdom-based traditions of health. Whereas modern medicine, in spite of all its dazzlement and all its technologies, does not focus on prevention. You probably know that in Chinese culture, in earlier times, the physicians got paid by the number of people they had on their books, but as long as they stayed healthy, they got the full fee. If, as the people got ill, their fees would go down. Now, mashallah, you are a successful businessman. Ask yourself, in that context, what they were promoting was health and well-being, and not disease. That today's model is the opposite.
The money is made from the disease.
So it is no longer health service, it is actually a disease service. So the incentives are for the people involved in it mostly to allow people to get as sick as possible, but not to die too soon.
Because you're a customer for life. So this is the big issue, which I've always argued with, that in this current modern medicine, modern era of the NHS, how much control do the companies who profit from the medicine have over these tools and apparatus of the state health service?
I think you know how much control they have. They have a significant influence and control in these matters. I mean, again, it's fascinating. Today there's a news about providing vaccine to people in UK or a class of people who are obese and who are not able to go to work, to offer them vaccine to deal with obesity and overweight. But the first category will be those who are unable to work. Now, what does that
So
tell
how is a vaccine going to solve their problems?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm no expert on the vaccine, but it is said that really the vaccine is going to, well, I assume, reduce their weight and they will be able to go to work. Again, the point I'm making, if we go back to the time when the British were ruling India, they actually did some research as to what was the reasons for the Indians at that time, the population in India, and it was very diverse at that time. How come some of the people are very healthy and others mediocre and others have poor health? And what they found was really the significant factor after hereditary was the lifestyle and in particular the diet of the people. And you know that today more than 70% of the chronic diseases are called the lifestyle diseases.
Because of diet?
Because of diet, but also the amount of sleep people get, how much walking or exercise they have, what is their, mental health situation. Now again, this research is nearly 150 years old. It
still applies, more relevant today than ever before.
It does.
Would you say we're getting less sleep now in this day and age than we were in previous generations?
Indeed, most people are sleep deprived. Yeah. So the
I
normal...
think I'm one of them.
mashallah, you look well enough, but maybe you need another extra 30 minutes or an hour.
Yeah,
Really, one needs on average about 8 hours.
we're not getting that.
Yeah?
No chance.
And in winter, a little more. Why? Because the
Really?
energies are less.
Wow.
Yeah? So 8 hours of sleep. And really, unless the individual has adequate and quality sleep, no function in the human body will be normalized.
True. Talking about food again, you know how one other thing that which really I get astonished with is how food affects your spirituality. You become what you eat. And if you're eating junk food, then it's going to make you ill. And when you're ill, you can't, pray, worship, or do meditation because these things require a full, healthy mind and body. And even in the places like the holy places in the world, like the Mecca, Medina, where people go for pilgrimage, a place, sacred places where we go to get spiritual nourishment, they're actually surrounded by junk food suppliers, mentioning no names, where people have gone there and you can see them lining up in their queues to get this dose of fast food that which they're probably already consuming in their countries like UK or Europe or America where they've come from. And I find that really bizarre, that how can they be so inclined to want to queue up and want to eat that rubbish?
Because there are very little other options.
That's also a factor, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So the way the
But that's by
environment...
design then, isn't it?
The way the environment is designed and promoted and developed, what you're calling fast food, which on the spectrum, fast food and then eventually junk food, is lethal for human health.
Mm-hmm.
In a similar way, it's lethal for human spirituality and emotions and the mind. So if we can't find nourishing, healthy, natural food while we're going for our spiritual sustenance.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, there is an English saying, that you are what you eat, and also you become what you eat. And really the relationship between food and human behavior is very well researched, even in modern times. For example, there's a clear relationship between criminality and food.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. There's a clear relationship between spirituality and the kind of food people eat.
Without doubt.
Yeah. But it's very difficult to find when you're outside food which is both healthy for the whole person, especially for people who are in the categories of low income. Yeah? Because the healthy food is made by design more expensive. And health destroying foods are made more cheaper.
It's like when you go to the supermarket, the organic section is more expensive than the non-organic section. And if you went to a farm to buy your natural raw milk and raw vegetables, they tend to be more expensive.
Yes. Again, it's all by design, You could say that many of our rulers and significant people, if you ask them, do they actually eat like that and do they consume like that?
No.
You'll see that they don't.
See, we've highlighted the problems, and there's solutions that we need to be talking about as well.
Inshallah.
As to how overcome these problems that yourself have highlighted. So we'll discuss that
Inshallah,
after the break in part 2.
Inshallah, we will do that. Jazakallah.